As we land in Paris on the start of our 6-month journey, Jennifer and I are very excited, and we are somewhat apprehensive about the journey ahead. But as I prepare and look back on our trip to France, I can't help but feel somewhat unfulfilled and unsatisfied. Sure, we ate lots of cheese, we met up with friends, had a great time, we saw heaps of nice things, went to cool places, and actually, this visit was never going to be like previous visits. In fact, Jennifer and I hardly did anything worth noting. I would get up every morning and go for my runs, and I would take some footage. We would walk around throughout the day, we would stop, we would eat, we would drink lots of coffee, we would sit at parks. But more importantly, what we did this time, which we didn't do on previous occasions, is that we took the time to slow down. We really did take our time with everything that we did. That's not to say that we didn't do all the standard stuff that you're supposed to do in Paris. Of course we visited the Eiffel Tower, and we finally did get to visit Montmartre after all these years. We even took in a walking tour of the Opera House. I think what became very obvious by the end of this trip to Paris was that we had spent so long planning and trying to execute this trip of ours that by the time we did get overseas, we were in awe of just the ability to be able to travel again and to hear a different language and to speak to people outside of our everyday lives. I can't begin to explain how much fun it was to be able to just slow down and walk around, see a bar that we like, stop off, have some drinks, have something to eat before we continued on our merry way. We discovered so much, we had so much fun this time around. A fine example of the advantages of slowing down is a market that we discovered in the Bastille, close to our hotel. It ran twice a week, and we had seen it in the past, but we never had time to stop. We did this time, and we enjoyed every bit of it. So it's just a quick video. This is a market we've been coming to every time we come to Paris, or we try to anyway. It's in the Bastille. We'll take some footage of it, but there is a creperie at this market that's famous. It is incredible, and we've just ordered a couple of crepes, and we're waiting for them, and we'll get some footage of it now. But if you're ever in Paris, come to the Bastille, and I wish I could tell you when this market runs, but I don't know. But here's some footage of it. And those crepes were absolutely amazing, as were the strawberries, as was the cheese, as was the wine. As you can imagine, everything is in Paris. Everything just tastes so much better. Even now, as I think about the food that we had, some of the desserts, some of the treats, my mouth is watering. I would go back to Paris simply for this market. It was amazing. This time around, Jennifer convinced me to go for the savoury crepes, which I have never done. I've never really enjoyed the savoury ones. I've always gone for the sweet ones, but I'm glad I did because they were absolute perfection, amazing. And these were the strawberries I was discussing. Only a few euro get you a punnet of them, and they were the size of small apples. They were just simply amazing, and they tasted so sweet. They were never bitter and they were never sour. I can't believe that these were sold. And what trip to Paris is complete unless you stop off at a boulangerie or a patisserie and get yourself a dessert and enjoy it by the River Seine. In this case, we got ourselves 2 perfect chocolate eclairs, and they were as good as they looked. They were simply amazing. I struggled to keep the camera steady here because I couldn't wait to dig into mine. It was so good, so good. I'll never forget that eclair. And speaking of treats, I got to enjoy this amazing millefeuille. I've never eaten anything like it. It was perfection, and it is something that I would go back to Paris for. The souffle was good. It wasn't my cup of tea. I'm not really into souffles, but Jennifer and Rebecca really enjoyed it. And looking at this footage, it's not hard to imagine why. That millefeuille, by the way, was from Café de la Paix, which is across the road from the Grand Opera House in Paris. There, it was an amazing venue and well worth a visit. As we continued our visit in Paris, we met up with some friends who were travelling from Australia as well, which was really fortunate. We actually ended up going to a cabaret show, which is not something I would ordinarily do, but it was something that was so much fun, and I will definitely do it again next time in Paris. It was great. I wasn't allowed to film, obviously, but I did manage to take some footage before and after the show. But once the actual show itself started, cameras are banned, and I wasn't going to test that much. But it was a hell of a lot of fun. It was a ball. So if you're in Paris, look them up. It's well worth the time and the effort. And it should get you into a lot less trouble than a visit to the Crazy Horse. This was the Grand Opera House that I mentioned at the start of the video. We did take a guided tour. I was a little bit reluctant at the start, but I'd never experienced the Opera House, and I wanted to get as much information as quickly as possible, and I felt that the guided tour was the best way to do it, and I'm glad I did. It was a grand building, and we got to visit most parts of it that you wouldn't ordinarily expect to be able to have access to. So that's where a guided tour has its advantages. The stage itself was so large that our tour guide told us it can fit the Arc de Triomphe inside it comfortably. As a matter of fact, the whole building was very, very beautifully decorated, very ornate. I can only imagine how interesting it would be to actually attend on a night, to watch a show, to be dressed up in a tuxedo, sipping champagne, taking in the crowd and the echoes and the laughter. It would be an experience. The whole opera was just an experience, and I would recommend it highly to anyone that has the time to visit Paris and to do one of these tours. Here we did a bit of indulging. People who are familiar with Woody Allen would recognise these steps from the movie Midnight in Paris. It was one of those bucket list things. Jennifer and I wanted to find it because we spent so much time during the COVID lockdown watching these sorts of movies, trying to get our fix of Paris, so to speak. And Midnight in Paris was one of those go-to movies, as was the movie Hugo. So, yeah. The other place we visited was the former residence of the famous author Ernest Hemingway. This part of Paris he discussed in great detail in his famous book A Movable Feast. We set out one day to find it, and only after 10 minutes of walking through the Bastille and across the river, we stumbled across it, and we're glad we did, because it was a lovely experience. We sat down in the square a little bit further down. His house is just off in the distance there to the right in that little street, and we enjoyed a coffee, and we also enjoyed the morning sun, which was a rarity in Paris because it was quite cold. And then we went down and did some tourist stuff, like take some footage of the Notre Dame Cathedral. This is interesting because I took this footage, but then I also took some footage on a morning that I went for a run. It's overcast, so it sort of blends in. This is actually at about 5:30 in the morning, but it looks like it's the same time of the day as the previous footage. But it is absolutely empty. And other than the cleaners and some council workers, there was nobody else around. It was eerie. I'd never seen a part of Paris without any human inhabitants, so that was cool. This is how we spent the last few days. We basically just lounged around and ate cheese and ate bread and drank wine and tried to enjoy the little bits of sun that we did get. We enjoyed the park. This is Place de Vosges. This was near our hotel in the Bastille. It's a beautiful little park. We always try and go there every time we're in Paris. It's Jennifer's favourite parks. And of course, our final night. What's a trip to Paris without a visit to the Eiffel Tower? So this is how we spent our final night. It was a cold night, but it was beautiful. Believe it or not, it's about 10 o'clock at night here, and it is still daylight. It's still dusk. and with that concludes our trip to Paris. But our adventure was just beginning. The next day we had to get up and we had to catch a high-speed train, and in only a few hours we were in Amsterdam. Amsterdam was beautiful. It was fun. It was clean. It was full of bikes. I mean, here, this is me filming some of the streets, but if you see Jennifer, she's actually trying to cross the road, but she can't because of, number one, the bikes. The bikes are everywhere and they're silent and deadly. You don't hear them coming. You have to physically see them. Otherwise, they will run right into you. We took a boat cruise our first full day, which was fun. Our host was fantastic. We were a bit seedy, and having champagne first thing in the morning is probably not the best thing after you had a big night drinking over dinner. But when in Amsterdam, we only actually had about 3 days in Amsterdam, but it did feel like a week. Would I recommend Amsterdam? Yeah, sure. If it's a place that you want to visit, then great. But if I had to choose between Paris and Amsterdam, I would have preferred to remain in Paris. But again, hindsight is one of those things. If we didn't take this trip to Amsterdam, then I'd still be wondering about it, wondering whether I should have sacrificed a couple of days from Paris to visit Amsterdam, especially because it was so easy to get there by train in only a couple of hours. It was well worth the trip, but now that I've seen it, would I go back? Probably not. But I'm glad I did it. The streets, the architecture, and that apple pie, that in itself was worth the trip. But now, our passport's ready again because we are now preparing to fly from Amsterdam to Tuscany. We stayed 5 days in Florence before spending a week driving through Tuscany, where we drank some more and we ate some more and some more, and then we went over to Venice before going over to Greece. But all in the next video. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye.